This creepy story happened to me about 6 months ago while I was still working at my previous job, and I thought I would share it while it still remains fresh in my mind. So I was at the office one day. I was working late and the rest of my co-workers were heading out to share a taxi home, so I was going to be the only one left in the building since our boss hadn't come into work for the past few days. I thought it was an interesting coincidence that he stopped showing up on Valentine's Day, but no one really knew for sure if he was seeing anyone. Although he had been coming to work on his motorcycle a lot more often lately, whatever that was supposed to mean. I didn't really care too much about all the gossip, but I was getting kind of tired of the whole thing since it seemed it was all anyone could talk about at the time. The strong scent of perfume in the office and the mystery gift on his desk also had everyone talking. It was actually pretty cool not having the boss around at first, but unfortunately, the security alarm had started acting up and I needed his signature to approve the cost to call someone to fix it. Also, the key to the supply room went missing since he left, and he hadn't returned any of my messages about that or the alarm. Which was surprising because he was the kind of person that would generally take things very seriously. Just as my colleagues were about to leave the building, they asked if there was anyone waiting up for me because there was someone sitting inside a car in the parking lot outside. They seemed genuinely unnerved when I told them that I wasn't expecting anyone, and they all decided to quietly leave together and asked me to be careful. What was really strange is that whoever it was had no business being there, but I initially brushed it off and thought the car would be gone by the time I got around to observing the parking lot for myself. About half an hour later, I received a message on my phone from Josh, one of my co-workers from earlier. Truth be told, I was so focused on my work, I had completely forgotten about the matter. I didn't respond to his message right away, but eventually I did find an excuse to pass in front of my boss's office overlooking the parking lot. I went into his office and peeked through the window. As I slowly pulled down the blinds, I was surprised to see someone still waiting in the parking lot. This was highly unusual, and it kind of creeped me out since the car was parked so close to mine. I couldn't really make out who it was, but as I looked closer I could see it was definitely a man smoking a cigarette. There was nothing familiar about him, and I didn't recognize the car. Since I was the only person at the office, I couldn't shake this uncanny feeling that he really was waiting up for me for some reason, and that it would be impossible to get to my car without him seeing me. I quickly returned to my desk and grabbed my phone so I could take a photo and confirm with Josh that it was the same car from before. While I waited for Josh to respond, the gift on the desk suddenly caught my eye. I thought that perhaps it was a perfume, which would explain the strong scent inside the office lately, but I was also curious to know if it really was a Valentine's gift and why it was still on his desk. It seemed strange to leave it at the office. As I slowly opened the box, I was surprised to see a passport inside. Suddenly I received a new message on my phone. I was initially confused by his response, but when I looked closely at the photo again, I could see that the car was empty. I was so quick to take the photo I hadn't even noticed. I immediately took another peek through the window. The car was still there, but with no one inside. It seemed so strange to abandon your car in the middle of the night, especially on a cold February night. It was getting late and I still had a few more hours of work to catch up on, so I decided to get back to it, hoping the car would be gone by the time I finished up. A few hours later, I got a little curious as to why Josh hadn't followed up with any other messages, which is when I realized that the battery on my phone was dead. I was too tired to stick around to recharge my phone at the office, so I closed up and cautiously descended into the parking lot. As I left the building, I felt a sudden chill, but I didn't know if it was from the cold air or from seeing the same old car still parked and abandoned outside. A couple of things started running through my head at that point, like maybe he had too much to drink and decided to walk home, or the car was extremely low on gas, but deep down I had a bad feeling. As I approached the abandoned car, I could see cigarette butts scattered all over the ground, everywhere, suggesting that he had been waiting for a lot longer than I thought. It seemed very bizarre to just take off after waiting for so long. I proceeded to my car and took one final look back at the office. which suddenly reminded me of the passport on the desk that I had completely forgotten to place back inside the box after getting distracted by my phone. Knowing that my boss would totally flip out if he found out that someone had been snooping around his office, I reluctantly headed back into the building, since I had already worked so late and I really didn't want to have to wake up extra early the next morning just to make sure I'd be the first to arrive at the office. I knew there was a chance that he wouldn't even show up the next day, but I wasn't going to risk it. I didn't bother turning the lights on because I knew my way around and I was going to be quick in and out. It was when I reached my boss's office that I noticed something very strange. The office chair that was previously behind the desk had been moved and both the box and the passport were missing. I had only been gone for a few minutes, so it seemed plausible that whoever it was might still be inside the building with me, so I was quick to observe the rest of the office. Despite the intense moment of silence, I started to feel somewhat relieved to see the same old familiar office that I had grown accustomed to, and there was no other indication that anyone else was there. However, this moment of silence and relief was quickly diminished by a loud thud coming from the supply room. It sounded like something very heavy hitting the floor. As I tried to figure out what could have caused such a loud noise, I suddenly heard the sound of what appeared to be a commotion coming from behind the door. After realizing that someone was in the supply room which required a key to open it, I began to assume that it was my boss or someone else with access to the office. But as I opened the door, I saw something that I will never forget and continues to haunt my darkest dreams. My knee-jerk reaction caused me to dash out of the office and immediately get to my car. Just as I was about to turn on the ignition, I instinctively looked up and saw the dark silhouette of a man standing by the same window in the office. I couldn't see a face, but I knew I was being watched. I turned the key and my heart sank as the engine failed to start. I tried again repeatedly before looking up at the office again, horrified to see that the dark figure had vanished. I gave the key one last turn, and to my relief the engine shuddered to a start. I drove off and headed to the nearest police station. When I arrived there, I told them everything. Thanks to the photo I had taken of the car that was parked outside, along with the partial description of the driver, the police were able to make an arrest, and the driver was identified. Shockingly, it turned out not to be my boss after all, but a relative of his with a violent criminal record. Apparently, my boss wanted to surprise his young girlfriend with a trip to Brazil by inviting her to his office and gifting her with a brand new passport he had arranged. But instead, she wanted to break the whole thing off, and in a fit of desperate rage, he killed her in cold blood and went into hiding. In an attempt to cover up his crime, he convinced his no-good brother to come by the office to collect the body and dispose of it. I will never forget that night, all the days I could smell her perfume as her lifeless body remained hidden behind the door while I went about my daily job. And the terrifying thought of being alone at night in the office with a violent criminal, I can only imagine what may have occurred had I not left the building or drove away soon enough. I consider myself very lucky. I never saw my boss again after that. In fact, no one did. He became a ghost. His last known location was somewhere in Rio, and that was it.